It's starting right now.
This is live. All right.
I just touched a freaking hot light bulb right after we started on air. Okay.
It's going to go really well.
Welcome to Saints on Cinema. I am Tim Wilde.
I'm Josh Edlow.
And Josh insisted that we film this episode, even though I don't have a voice because I've been sick for a week and a half. And we kept putting this list off after we announced it on Facebook. But he's insists on getting it out because he thought it'd be more amusing to record with me not being able to speak very well. I guess he doesn't like listening to me. But
I believe what I said was it will be an improvement over other videos. So,
ha ha ha. So this week's episode, we're talking, or this month's top 7 list was top 7 high school movies. And Josh and I deliberated just slightly on what we were going to kind of talk about our list, but then we stopped that immediately because we wanted to split off on our own criteria, make our list, and then come back and talk about what we were looking for. And this list is a little bit different for both of us, I think, where my top 7 items are not necessarily prioritized in my favorite to my least favorite of the 7. What I did was I looked for things that I look for and love about a sports, or not a sports movie, a high school movie, and aspects of those relationships and characters and the stories that I like. And then I just picked movies that satisfied each of those criteria the best. So just quickly, some things I was looking for. And my favorite high school movies and stories. I like stories about being the new kid because as a kid, as a Navy brat, I traveled around and had to start in different schools, not in high school, but I could relate with movies about characters that were new in town and had to face that awkwardness of meeting people and get shaken down by bullies sometimes and finding girls that you have crushes on and all that stuff and all that whole world being open every time you move to a new community and go to a new school. I can relate with that. So I love stories about people who are new in town. Bullies. Growing up, there's always been an issue where there's always the meaner kids, or the kids are always, messing with the smaller guys. And I was always a little bit smaller growing up. And so I always liked stories about bullies and the overcoming of bullies through different ways. And a lot of different movies tackle that differently. I, growing up, always had huge crushes on a lot of people, even teachers. And I always love high school stories or movies about kids with crushes. Sometimes it pans out for them. Usually it does. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they learn things about themselves that change who their interests are, and their romantic intents change, and their motives and everything change. Like those are really fun stories, and that's kind of a factor in most high school movies.
Wait a minute. You saying that you had some teachers. Is this turning into a confessional?
No, it just saying that I was mature growing up. Let's just say that. The next thing I like is the friendships. I like stories about high school friendships where characters, either similar characters who are not the most popular, or characters are different, they can still get together and become friends. Those relationships and bonds are really what kind of help people get through most situations in life, but especially in school. It's a big challenge dealing with so many people, different types of people, different challenges that kids go through and high school kids go through, that you really do rely on your friends. And I think those relationships are really important. Going into high school, I always was fascinated and loved the idea of rebels. And I thought being a rebel and kind of, going against the grain and just trying your best to not fit in, to do your own thing and be really cool. I thought that image was a really important thing, and I love movies that kind of emphasize and exaggerate that very much. Coolness is a really big deal, like I said, especially being a new kid. Being able to fit in and trying to be cool and be accepted with different things in different areas in the country was always a little challenge, being trying to embrace that and figure that out, and then finding yourself and your image. And that image is a huge deal in high school. I always like movies that has someone trying to figure that out, and their image and their coolness is a big thing. Classes and cliques. Sadly, that's such a big deal to kids, and I wasn't really faced with a lot of difficulty in fitting in different cliques. I didn't need to reach out, but people really are separated, and they just kind of or break up, and what's the word, compartmentalize. They compartmentalize their groups and their peers, and it's hard for people to overcome differences. And I like movies that do emphasize cliques and accept them, and acknowledge them, but also come up with ways in the plot to overcome them. So those are kind of the main things that I was looking for in my favorite movies. As I was saying about movies I love and stories in high school, those are the things that I like the most.
Okay, so I had a lot of the same criteria. I think I liked. I think I would broadly categorize it as movies that encapsulate a portion of the high school experience. Not that the high school was, or the fact that they were in high school was a tangential part of the story, but it was a central theme. So some of the themes that you talked about, I would agree with, like fitting in is a big one that I thought was apparent in some of my lists, or rather in my list. Cliques, and dealing with cliques. That's something else that I would see. Also, movies that have to do with figuring out who you are and what you want to do with your life, which is a big part of high school, particularly in the end of high school and that senior year moments. And then also, I was kind of looking for movies that
Cut.
I was also looking for movies that somewhat reminded me of my own high school experience in some way, not like it was exactly the same, but things that I could see me and my friends doing, or a certain character that reminded me of somebody I knew in high school. That type of stuff helped me, when I would watch the high school movie, relate to it more. So those were my criteria. I think we had a lot of the same thoughts on that. One of the things that we talked about a lot on Facebook before we started this is what defines a high school movie. And I think that my definition is probably a little more narrow than some of the people in our Facebook, some of our Facebook fans. I didn't find, like I said, it seemed like some people were using a broad definition of something that dealt with someone who was in the age of 14 to 18, or something that had to, there was a high school involved in the movie. And I just felt like that was too broad. I feel like it has to be a central theme, a theme where you could, where you wouldn't be able to take the high school out of it and still have the same movie.
Agreed. So that's how I felt. I think it was more about the experience of high school and movies that really captured things that I associated with and things that were important to me as I reflect on my high school experiences growing up, or my high school experience and experiences growing up in school. So we wanted to go through a few of the the movies that were suggested from our Facebook fans. Just a few of these that are not on our list, and some of them would be honorable mentions, but we'll just kind of go through these and talk about them real quick. One of them is Rebel Without a Cause, and I know that's a really popular movie, a really good movie. I've not seen the whole thing. I saw half of it years ago, and I really liked what I saw. And that has what's his name?
James Dean.
James Dean. Yeah, and James Dean only did a few movies before he died in that car crash. It was a car crash, right? I remember. Yeah, all the good ones die in a car crash. Um,
Plane crash.
yeah. Yeah, Rebel Without a Cause. I remember the things I remember about it. I was really impressed with it, and I can see why that one would be on a lot of people's list. I just haven't seen the whole thing, so I couldn't include it on my list.
Rebel Without a Cause was one that I really enjoyed as well. I remember seeing it in high school during a humor and satire class where all we did was sit around and watch movies all day, which is a fantastic class if you get a chance to take it. And I enjoyed the movie, but it's just not one for me personally that has longevity. It's not one that I go back to. It's not one that if it shows up on TV, I watch. It's not one that's on necessarily one that I even own. Good movie. It could get it. I can understand why someone would want to do it, but I just don't put it on my list.
Another one was Encino Man. I thought of this one initially, but Encino Man it doesn't as strongly capture a lot of things we're talking about. That's one with Sheen Austin and Brandon Fraser when he's the caveman, and they find him, they thaw him out in Pauly Shore, and it has a lot of Pauly Shore antics and Brandon Fraser. That was his first real movie, if I remember. But there wasn't a whole lot to it. There was the girl that Sheen Austin liked, and then her boyfriend that was always threatening messing with him and everything. And there was the acceptance, and they had the big party and all that stuff. And it was kind of him discovering who he was. All that aside, it was just all right. It just didn't capture all those things as strongly as some other movies on my list.
So I would say that movie is a great example of a movie that technically meets the criteria, but for some reason, just in my heart, I can't put it in as a high school movie. And I don't really have a good reason why. I just don't consider it necessarily a high school movie. And that's the same way I feel about The Karate Kid. I think that was one that was on a lot of people's lists, which by all intents and purposes, it meets all the criteria. I just don't see it as a high school movie. And I don't have a good explanation for it. I just don't. So it's just not on my list.
I agree with that one. Speaking of Ralph Macchio, Outsiders was on a lot of people's lists. I haven't seen Outsiders. I bought it. I have it
Confessional.
Yes, that one's on my confessional list. I have it. I just haven't had a chance to watch it yet. I will watch it and do a review because I wanted to
buy it recently in the Walmart bin because I just recently bought it in the Walmart bin.
It's where I do most of my shopping for a lot of these kind of things.
Yep.
Another one, Napoleon Dynamite. I love Napoleon Dynamite. I think it captures very strongly a very unique social aspect in school where kind of the outcasts and some of the losers and the weirdos that I can relate to. A lot of people didn't even appreciate or like Napoleon Dynamite. Those are the people that didn't get it. Anyone that thought that movie was funny gets it and they can relate. And it fits the criteria very, 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 very well. It just didn't get on my list. But I love the movie, and yes, it definitely is a top. If this was a top 10 list, it would have been on my list.
So I will withhold my discussion of Napoleon Dynamite for reasons that you can probably guess right now.
All right. Okay. That's fine. A lot of people talked about Better Off Dead, and they said the same. They brought that movie up also when we did our top 7 unrelated comedies, top 7 underrated comedies, and I haven't seen it. And that's one I still need to go back and watch. I just got to get a hold of it. But I haven't seen it, so I can't weigh in on that one. Josh?
I would say that movie is slowly meeting my overrated comedy list because people keep talking about it. And I saw it. I thought it was funny. I don't understand why people find it that funny. It's kind of a dark comedy. It's good. I enjoyed it. I don't get it. I mean, I think it's a good movie. I did not walk away saying I need to watch this movie again and again and again and again. And I've seen it a couple times. So
fair enough. I'll let you know what I think of it when I get a chance to see it.
So another one that I remember from the list or from the Facebook conversation that came up quite a few times that I don't necessarily agree with as a high school movie is Back to the Future. That movie's about time travel, not about high school. And it's about family. Not about high school. I can understand if someone wants to have a broad interpretation of a high school movie, how they could include it on a list. Mine is just a little more narrowly defined.
I can see that. I think it would qualify where the thing is in that movie, you have a lot of the relationships that we talk about. You have an outcast, George McFly, and you have the bullying situation. You have him who's having to do everything for Biff, and you have him who really likes the girl. Biff interferes with that, and then you have him overcoming that challenge, and then him trying to awkwardly go up and talk to her and then dance with her, and the chemistry and everything that happens. I can relate to a lot of the same fears and everything that he has, which are totally a high school environment situation. And I agree, most of it isn't in the high school, and the plot is all about Marty going back in time or going back to the future. But I can see where it would be mentioned, but it's not on my list either. Last one or not last one, we have Juno. Juno is a really good movie. I don't even know, is that one R?
No, PG-13. It's an excellent movie. I really liked it a lot. Not a high school movie in my mind, but an excellent movie. That movie deals so specifically with a very small percentage of what high school girls have to deal with, that I wouldn't say it broadly is something that can broadly appeal to the high school base. I just don't find it as a high school movie for that reason. I think it's a great movie. I think it's something that kind of opens your eyes to the issues that some girls have to face when they get in that situation, and how difficult it is for a young girl to make the decisions that she had to make in the movie. I think also she was incredibly funny. I thought it was a great movie, and Michael, what's his name? The boy, Michael Cera did a great job in it as well. But it's just one of those things where I didn't feel I would put it in my top 7 high school movies, because I don't feel like as a high school movie per se, it belongs in the top 7. I think it belongs in the conversation of a certain type of movie, but not necessarily high school movie.
I agree. I think it's a movie about a situation that high school kids have to deal with at times. Not necessarily a high school environment, it just happens to be 2 high school characters in the situation. Really great story, really great message. It really makes you think about a lot of things with the ordeal, but it's not a high school movie. I agree with that.
Yeah, and I would say also, if you want to categorize it as a high school movie, I guess you technically can, but for purposes of a top 7 high school movies, in that genre, I don't think it's top 7. I think it could be in the conversation of a top 7 in a different type of genre than that.
Okay, I agree with that. All right, so after we discussed what we were looking for in our movies, what I did, like I said, I didn't put mine in a priority of my favorite to my least favorite of my 7. These are the movies I think that captured each of those kind of things most overwhelmingly. And I think the ones I put towards the top of my list met a lot of the criteria. So my number 7